Okay, we're back again. Here is the other approach. The one that I said will seem identical to what we just did, but is actually, it's not the opposite. It's the same two basic principles, but the order of them is reversed and the priority is reversed. So in the other one, the focus is on how do we use capitalism, the appeal to markets, the appeal to consumer interests, supply, demand, all these raw business practices and techniques. How do we use that to do some moral good? Here what we're going to see is the priority reversed. Here we're going to say how, by appealing to the consumer's desire to do moral good, can we buy and sell things? So here it's that what you put up front to the consumer is not luxury and trademarks. And what guides the buying and selling relationship is not the size of the different parties like the co-ops, normal business stuff, but is rather you put the moral appeal, the moral issue right up front. Now what motivates the buying and selling is not, say, luxury, but is morality first. So now it's morality, moral sentiments driving business practices instead of business practices being geared toward morality. Like I said, same two things but flipped in terms of priority. This is going to be what, say, TOMS shoes looks like. Now this may be confusing because I'm going to use the coffee examples from the book. But remember, these are different coffee examples. They're about appealing to the moral sentiments of consumers first. This is fair trade coffee. Fair trade coffee says right up front, directly to the consumer, we pay the farmers a good wage, a good price for these coffee beans. So you should buy it because it's morally good to support these farmers. It doesn't make any claims necessarily that the coffee's better. That would be trademarking, that would be luxury. It just says, hey, you'll be doing moral good when you buy these. Same thing, TOMS shoes were basically, if you buy a pair of shoes, they give a pair of shoes to poor children in need. It says you should buy these shoes, consumer, because it'll help someone else. That is, you should buy these things because it's ethical. So, fair trade coffee works this way because it says we fairly pay the workers, which is moral. TOMS shoes works this way. Okay? Now, why would this work? Remember at the beginning of the recording of the first recording, I said, hey, we're talking about capitalism here. And whether capitalism is morally neutral or whether capitalism can be turned toward moral good. Now remember, at the beginning of our coffee article starts out and says, Adam Smith describes this sort of raw or pure capitalism that says, hey, markets go where the profit is, and buyers and sellers, while not being evil or anything, are always going to look out for themselves first. Okay, that's standard capitalism. That's what we sort of opened this discussion with. Towards the end of the reading, Lee and Lee point out that Adam Smith also said some other things. And what Adam Smith also said was, while people do work in their own individual self-interest, and that's how capitalism works, there is at the same time a different impulse in people at the very same time that works totally differently. And this is what he called moral sentiments, moral feelings basically. And it's what we would basically just call with him empathy. Think about it. When you see someone suffering, all other things being equal, you want that suffering to stop, right? And when you see someone else enjoying life, rejoicing, you're happy about that, right? Now, there's always exceptions. If it's the person who stole your girlfriend or boyfriend from you, no, you don't want to see them rejoice. But we're talking about generically average human beings. So same thing, even though you don't know these Ethiopian coffee farmers, when I tell you that they're starving and they had to turn to growing drugs to support their families, it makes your heart hurt a little bit, right? Or if I tell you, hey, there's kids in Argentina who can't afford shoes, and they walk around all day barefoot, their little feet getting scuffed up and cut by broken glass, and they can get diseases in their feet, ringworm and things like that, that makes you feel bad, right? Now, you feel bad. If you could snap your fingers and make that go away, you would, right? Same thing if I tell you, oh, wages are going up in China. People have a better standard of living. You're happy about that, right? Okay. So what we're focusing on now, the other kind of blending business and morality does is it puts the morality first. It says, hey guys, there's Ethiopian coffee farmers and they're starving. If you want to help them not starve, how about you pay a little bit more for your coffee, and every cent of that little bit more will go straight to the farmers so that they don't starve. And you go, hey guys, I know you want a pair of shoes, right? But wait a second, how about you buy these shoes? Because maybe you didn't think about this, but there are kids in other countries who get diseases just by walking around barefoot. How sad is that? If you buy these shoes, a single child will get a single pair of shoes and get to avoid all that bad stuff. Now, once more, this seems like a win-win. You were already going to buy coffee, and nobody's making you buy this. You feel better because you're benefiting these farmers. They feel better because they're able to work at a decent wage. Same thing. The kid benefits. Now she's got shoes. You got these cool TOMS that people like to wear. You benefit and she benefits. Okay? Once more, I'd like to ask you, do you see any shortcomings with this kind of model? Where the sort of first message is there's a moral problem. If you buy our product, we can help work and solve that moral problem. Please buy our product. Do you see any problems with that? Once more, the problems could be of all sorts. It's either actually immoral, or it's moral and good but really inefficient, or it only works for some products and people but not other products and people. There's whole ways that there's potentially problems with this. So, before we go on to the TOMS shoes and the Heifer little article, I just want to say a few more things about this coffee article before we go. First is that what Adam Smith says is that these two feelings inside of us are very different, but they're not opposites exactly. They can be combined together. That is, your personal desire to get things you're buying for the cheapest price possible, and your personal desire to sell things that you're selling for the highest price possible. That's what we call self-interest. Okay? Now, it doesn't mean selfish. It just means that the center of what's going on there is you thinking about what's good for yourself. And it says that's compatible with, but different from, basically considering others as well. So here's the thing is, ideally with something like TOMS shoes or fair trade coffee, you're still getting something that you want yourself. That would be the self-interest, the sort of standard capitalist desire to get what you want. But also, surely there's ways to combine that where you're giving something to someone else at the same time that you're getting what you want for yourself. Right? TOMS shoes look pretty cool, or at least some of them do. People seem to like them, right? But you're also giving shoes to other people. Seems like a win-win. It seems like they're combining. So again, let me say clearly what Adam Smith says. These are two very different impulses in us, but they're not strictly speaking opposites. If they were opposites, you could only do one at a time, or your life would be guided solely by one and never by the other. However, they're just different. Like, say, the love of chess and the love of baseball. They're different, but they're not opposites. So you should, in theory, be able to do both at once. Like, I suppose you could play chess while at a baseball game and get both. Or you could buy fair trade coffee, get the coffee you want, and benefit the farmers. You see? Okay. So, here's another possible issue separate from the articles about TOMS or fair trade coffee, etc. It only works if people know about the problem. So my question to you is, how do we increase the visibility and the visibility of these problems in order to stimulate people's moral sentiments, in order to get them to want to benefit others? Because as Lee and Lee point out, people can be very charitable. When there is the flooding in Japan, the Red Cross put out a call and people instantly, it's a pretty cool world we live in now, people instantly donated all this money just by tapping their smartphone. You could just text, I think you just texted a number in and it donated instantly $10. And they made all this money to help these poor people out instantly. However, you have to let people know that there's a flood in Japan. You have to let people know that there's starving Ethiopians, kids in Argentina without shoes. Okay, so that's not exactly a problem, but it's a practical issue to overcome. How can we let people know about these issues without overwhelming them, without depressing them, without turning them off, basically? So imagine if there was a picture of, say, the starving Ethiopian on the front of your coffee, that would probably be counterproductive. If there's a picture of a kid who's got disease from fungi when he's walking around without shoes on the TOMS box, it's probably counterproductive. So what I'm asking is, what's the most effective way to raise consciousness and stimulate moral sentiments to generate this sort of affect in people, this feeling? Okay. Now we're going to pivot to the little article about TOMS and the brief note about Heifer. Okay. So there's a series of criticisms about TOMS shoes in this article. Okay. But as they said, as the author says, she says, look, I'm not saying that TOMS is evil or anything like that. It's just that it doesn't deliver on the promises it makes. Basically is that it makes you feel good about buying these things. But really, a simple cash donation would do the job better. So here, in a different way, is a sort of meta criticism, a big background criticism that we have to grapple with. As much good as this ethical consumerism might do, it might do more good if you just gave these people money through charity. You see what I'm saying? It might be more efficient to just donate the money it would cost to buy a pair of shoes instead of buying a very expensive pair of shoes, then having that money go pay CEO salaries, advertising, etc., then pay to have those shoes shipped across the world to Argentina. Maybe it would just make more money, make more sense to donate a few dollars to the Argentinian community. Right? So, the thing here is that while ethical consumerism does make you feel good, and that's a way to sell more TOMS shoes and more Starbucks coffee, maybe you could do more moral good if it wasn't ethical consumerism and if it was just ethical charity. Okay? That's a possibility lingering in the background with all these examples. Not that they're evil, but that they do minimal good, and you could do way more good, way more bang for your buck if you did charity, basically. Okay. Another big issue that comes up is through this quote from the TOMS article. Okay? She gives a description about how it works, and she says, TOMS shoes is not going to make the world a better place. She says, let me be very clear here, though. A desire to help other people is a good thing. Paying a little more for a pair of shoes or messenger bag because you want to purchase something that helps people is commendable. It's morally good. If that's you, well done. Okay, and then she says, but the effects may not be quite what we think they are. So this article actually opens up for us a general ethical issue, a general ethical question. And this is something you have to answer for yourself. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how to think on this, but you need to know where you stand on this yourself. What is it that makes something ethical? What makes something good? So I'm just going to name a few different responses for you all. And here's the thing is, probably all of them will sound good to you. But in different scenarios, only one of these good things will be achievable and the other ones aren't. So my point is this, is I'm going to list off some possible basic categories of what might make an action morally commendable, morally good. But basically, you have to pick which one you think is most important in your life, because sometimes you'll only be able to get one of those good things. Sometimes an action of yours will achieve one of those good things and exclude the other. So you need to know for yourself, personally, in advance, which one you're going to choose if push comes to shove. Because sometimes they're mutually exclusive, that is, you can only get one. And you have to know going in whether you're willing to accept one of these and lose the other. Okay, so a few different things that commonly are said to make an act good. One is the intention of the agent, the intention of the person doing the activity. That would be like what is said here, that a desire to help people is a good thing. So some people will say, hey, TOMS shoes is good because my intent is partly to help out a child in another country. That's a good intent, therefore my action is good. Now, there's a totally different way to think about what makes something good, and this is basically utilitarianism. Other people, not the desire or intent that we just talked about, but other people are going to say, hey, desires or intentions aside, you have to ignore those. What matters are the actual consequences or results. And that's what this article by Taub about TOMS shoes is closer to saying. It's saying that it doesn't matter how you feel inside. What matters is the actual results for, in this case, the kids who get shoes. Not your intention inside about buying the shoes as a consumer, but the effects outside, externally, for people who are the recipients, not the agents of the action. And her point is this, is that a lot of these kids actually don't need shoes. They need something, but they don't need shoes. That is, they don't benefit very much by you giving them shoes. So then she'd say, hey, the net total consequence is pretty unimportant, so the moral good done is pretty minimal. And I'll actually just list those two. I was going to list off some other ways of thinking about it, what makes something good or bad. But those two are important to list here because they're often in tension. Let's put it this way. If the main ethical intent of the guy who founded TOMS Shoes was just to start a cool business and get a lot of attention, I'd say that's a crappy motive. And therefore, if motive and intent and desire matter, then it's a bad company, he's a bad person. However, if results matter, then if the benefits are good, then it's a good company, independent of what his personal individual motives are. So you see what I mean? You have to know in advance whether you think intent determines whether something's good or not, or whether it's the results. And we could flip it as well. If your intent when you buy TOMS shoes is to show off to other people about how ethically advanced you are, or if your intent is just to have a cool pair of shoes, if intent and motive and desire matters, then sorry, you're not a great person. You're sort of a crappy person. Okay. On the other hand, if your intent is pure as the driven snow, the only reason you bought those shoes was to help a kid out so they could get a pair of shoes. But if this article is correct and basically the kid didn't benefit hardly at all from that, then we could still say it's not very good, because if consequences are what matters, no significant consequences happened. Okay? That's another criticism, phrased slightly differently towards the end of the Taub article. Okay? Where it says, actually it's near the top, it's the fairy godmother part. Okay? And this is part of the point there. Okay? Is that it seems when we act this way that we have a good motive and a great consequence. Best of both worlds, right? And what she points out is actually, this is a way of patting ourselves on the back and thinking that we're so great, and actually not consequentially helping anyone out much at all. Okay? That would be sort of a failure in terms of consequences. Okay? A second point added to this, though, which isn't strictly just about consequences and utilitarianism, is that it just feels sort of cruddy, right? If through TOMS shoes or fair trade coffee or any of these sort of things, if you feel like you're a savior, that basically like the white American swoops in and saves all of Argentina or saves all of Ethiopia by having bought, a $7 bag of coffee or a $50 pair of shoes. That's sort of a cruddy, creepy way to think about yourself in relationship to the rest of the world. It's basically like a savior complex, right? It wouldn't factually be accurate. And also, you see how it sort of perpetuates this sort of myth that you as an American can save the rest of the world just by sort of snapping your fingers. Like the article says, suddenly an ordinary shoe buying experience has been transformed into a magical fairy tale. And you can see this same problem shows up with things like farmers markets. If you've ever seen the show Portlandia, there's probably lots of examples on that, where people will say, well, I'm saving local farmers, right? Well, how are you saving local farmers? Well, one time I went to the farmers market and I paid $4 for a head of lettuce instead of $3. It's like, whoa, don't break your arm from patting yourself on the back, right? You did not just become the savior of the whole world. All you did was you bought a pair of shoes. Calm down, right? Okay. Now, here's a possible response we could have to that. We could say, hey, but what harm is it doing? Even if TOMS shoes don't help much, they're probably helping better than doing nothing, which I'll be honest is what I did yesterday in terms of charity and donation. I didn't help anybody. So if I would have bought a pair of TOMS shoes today, even if it's not saving all of Argentina, it's giving some kid a pair of shoes. That seems harmless. That seems like it can only be doing something good. Okay? I think that's a fair point. A possible response, though, is this. Is actually, it might be more harmful than it seems. Donating shoes to these foreign countries can actually put local shoemakers out of business. That's a possible harm. It can also make the kids or the community dependent on handouts where they'll say, hey, we just have to wait and these donations will come and save us again in the future. That's another possible harm, is that it makes them dependent, as the article says, dependent on handouts. So I think those are possible real problems. So what can we do so that we don't cripple the local economy by distorting it through shoe donation in this case? And so that we don't sort of infantilize, it's called, where you make people like infants, make the locals dependent on handouts from TOMS shoes or Starbucks or whomever. Well, there's two options mentioned here. At the end of the TOMS article, it says, hey, honestly, if you just donate cash, it has better outcomes than giving shoes. So that's one option. Like I said, just go back to charity. Just donate money and let the people use it as they see fit. Okay, because the point is this, is that while you think that people need shoes in Argentina, and some of them probably do, if you give money to any Argentinian, they will surely spend it on what they need most. Okay, and there's examples given in the article where it says there's studies done that the people benefit over time more when they're given the freedom and autonomy to spend cash how they see fit, rather than when they're given something that we think they want. And here's the other basic option, and this is the Heifer International that it ends with. As you can tell by the link I gave you and everything, the way Heifer International works is it's a charity, but it operates like a business. So it's a charity, it gives people in foreign countries who live in poverty, it gives them stuff. But what it does is instead of giving them cash, which is a one-time benefit, or giving them shoes, which is a one-time benefit that maybe isn't what they really need, it asks the local people what they need most. It asks them what sort of animals, they always give animals, what sort of animals they need most. Now here's the thing about animals. They're a gift that keeps on giving, because animals reproduce in a way that shoes don't. And unlike cash, which can be spent one time, animals generate things that can be sold. So if you give someone a cow, they can get milk from it every day and sell the milk. If you give someone not a fleet, not a host, what are they called? A flock of chickens? Are they called a flock? A group of chickens, then they get eggs every day. And they can breed the chickens, eat them when they get too old to lay eggs. You see, it's like a perpetual infinite motion machine, right? So the reason I say it's sort of like a business is that it lets the people figure out what they need in order to buy and sell milk, eggs, whatever works in their community. So it gives them the freedom and the choice. It also, you don't give them an animal to eat, you give them an animal to make a business of buying and of selling things. It's also, unlike a charity cash donation or a donation of shoes, something that can perpetually give again and again and again. So here's a twist about Heifer International, which I think is cool, is that they give family A a goat, say. And what they say to that family is they say, we're giving this to you, but it's sort of like a business deal. You use that goat for as long as you can. But what you have to do is you either have to give that goat to someone else after a while, or even better, get that goat to breed, make it get pregnant, and then give a goat to someone else. And then that person also has to promise to give it away or make it breed at a certain point. And then you've got this infinitely reproducing chain. So now you see, you're not going to make the people dependent and hope and wait for some Western savior to swoop in and save them. Now they've got something that they're developing for themselves. They choose who it goes to, and it's totally autonomous. The community decides for themselves for the rest of their lives. So that maybe is the most sweetest of all the spots we'll come up with today. To me, that's the best example that I've seen of something that harnesses the power of how markets work, choice, autonomy, buying and selling, but also works sort of like a charity. Okay, so final question here. With Heifer International, I've said I think it's the best option I've seen so far, but there's probably something about it that's not perfect. So what do you think are the strengths and weaknesses of Heifer International? So I'm going to cluster all these together as one question, but what are the strengths and weaknesses of trademarks? What are the strengths and weaknesses of cooperatives? What are the strengths and weaknesses of TOMS shoes and fair trade? What are the strengths and weaknesses of this Heifer model, Heifer International? Okay, so that's our session for today. Hopefully this gets us all thinking about how to make the biggest impact how when even we're buying coffee, we can maybe make others' lives better, and also and to keep that going throughout the future. Okay? So thank you, everyone.